G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks Off. Wow, we are watching a revolution unfold in real time in Iran. And where are the liberals? Remember how they used to stand vigils outside the South African embassy? Freedom! The only people protesting so far are Iranians. Most of the support is online. We are seeing a different form of protest, however. But I want to compare the protests for the jailed women in Iran who were recently released after protests by Iranians and efforts to have them released by President Trump, compared to Renee Not So Good. Recent reports indicate that for context, since February 23, senior clerics stated around 50,000 out of 75,000 mosques nationwide no longer operate due to a lack of congregants and prayer leaders. This comes after a decade of falling attendance in mosques. Now, at the time in 20 years prior, it was almost 100% of the nation. Even if you weren't Muslim, people were forced, either out of fear or simply cultural compliance, to go to mosques in order to avoid the ire of the Iranian security forces. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard was their primary terrorist arm. Now, recently, of course, thanks to efforts by President Trump and others, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has been diminished. The mosque closures reflect a profound change in Iranian culture. While there has been a rise in secularism, some suggest the growing numbers of Iranians are less religious. However, those who do seek spiritual fulfillment, the largest rising religion in Iran is Christianity. Now, yes, Iranians' primary Persian religion is Zontarism, of which Freddie Mercury of Queen was, in fact, Iranian, although he was born in exile in Morocco, I believe, and though raised Zoroastrian, he was an eclectic religious person. You look up Queen, some of their early songs were about religion and Christian and Jesus in general. They actually transformed when they became a pop group. They were experimental music in the beginning. Right, so I've given you context. The Iranian Revolution comes primarily from widespread disillusionment with the Iranian government. Mostly, as you get older, it gets less and less. Those closer to the revolution, of course, are mostly out of cultural compliance. But as you get further away from it, the more you step back, the more you see with clarity of history. And you actually know, right, the Shah was just put in poor light, that economics rather than incompetence was the problem. And most of their economic issues come from being undermined by foreign powers. Now, the Shah did make some mistakes. I'm not saying that he was perfect. But the Iranian security forces were not as heavy-handed as they made out to be. That was mostly, of course, American media who painted the Shah as some evil dictator. It was a colour revolution that backfired on them. And it was, ironically, not one but two revolutions that kept changing governments in Iran, which led to the destabilization and the rise of the Islamic Republic. And of course, what happened when the Islamic Republic took over? All the liberal academics were killed. Yeah. So, now, this is a fresh protest. From 23 to 25, there were various protests about various issues. But then came the arrest of Bahrani girls, and that 5 sparked widespread protests. And people these protests morphed very quickly from feminism, anti-hijab, which there have been many anti-hijab protests in the past, about the protests about the rape and exploitation of girls, particularly by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, with less and less power and less young men joining the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, mostly ironically because they can't afford. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard can't afford to pay, right? People in Iran who work for the government won't accept pay in Iranian pesos because it's worthless. They can't buy anything with it. The buying power in Iran is ridiculous. And as more and more people flee this major cities, of which there are approximately 13, although that's disputed because it's believed that some are what you would call fabrications. They are pretty much just big hollow constructs put together in a big show about meeting their housing obligations. Remember, a lot of what a lot of people don't understand, the Iranian Revolutionary government is a form of Islamic communism, right? The healthcare, they have all these housing programs, but they do have property rights. So it's more social. So it's more akin to China than the Soviet Union, although it is still, and predominantly, even though on paper it's a Russian ally, it's predominantly influenced since the mid-20s by China, with Iran wanting to be the central figure in BRICS, although many people think it's actually India, given you almost never see the Ayatollah Khamenei. Deliberately mispronounced. Right. But in the last few months, it's gone even stranger. When academics in Iran and outside Iran compare the periods of history, their best, turns out, the Shah. They want the Shah back. They want their constitutional monarchy back, right? They want a central figurehead to whom they can appeal and have, a dialogue. And if anything goes wrong with the government and with support of the people in the courts, they can remove a government. What a wonderful concept! Could you imagine if God Emperor Trump was like that, and he could say, yes, I have a petition here, we recall Congress. Well, maybe just recall individuals. However, could you imagine America if the Gavin Newsom recall worked? It'd be so much better. You'd have governors shitting their pants. That's why, of course, it failed. Because neither Republican nor Democrat want the people to remove corrupt politicians. But here we have Iran exactly doing that, and once had the power to do that. Though I don't know if the Shah ever actually removed anybody, but, the Shah admitted in exile that he made mistakes. He moved too late and moved too swiftly to fix the economy. And it was, again, their economy was too dependent on oil, a commodity at the time which was wildly fluctuating, and America's alliance was weak because of corruption, like Jimmy Carter, who didn't give a flying fuck about anybody but himself. Right? He never did anything for the people of Iran. Now, Iran did have many issues post-World War II. Remember, America invaded. This was quietly removed from your history books. America secured the Iranian border, Azerbaijan, and the Iran oil fields, which, of course, was allegedly claimed to be defended by the Russians, but it was actually an army of Iranians put together by America. Right? America's Third Army that was predominantly moved into North Africa, of course, which most veterans of those campaigns, that was Patton's army. Those, of course, with Patton gone and not many people talking about Iran, quickly, Iran wasn't a sexy campaign, so, it quickly disappeared from the history books. I mean, I believe there's over 31 battles that aren't mentioned in any history books, simply because they were either minor or didn't turn out too well for the Allies. But the Shah, where before the revolution, right, had built public schools, used his money to feed and combat poverty, right, mostly kids, right. He believed that education for all, not just Iranian boys, right? These were boys and girls going to the same school. They were learning English. They were learning reading, writing, arithmetics. They was going in the process of building universities. What you don't realize is in the 9th century, Iran was the superpower. If Iran was modern, right? If 9th century Iran was modern, it'd be America. Iran was scientifically advanced. It had the most sophisticated writing system at the time, had the most sophisticated courts. It was observing the movements of stars and planets in real time, observatories, and were beginning the basics of algebra. And they also had the largest standing army in the world at the time. Now, yeah, Iran did not turn out well. It fought many of its neighbors. It fought over water, and that has been their problem for thousands of years. Now, in the past, Iranians had solved the water issues. Now, water is the primary driver of the Iranian economy's failure, right? With so much water dedicated to nut production, and the Iranian economy's been drained to pay China to build dams which create further water shortage because there's no water in the rivers. All the rivers are dry, water's been diverted. They won't bring in engineers like the Saudis did. The Saudis solved their water problem by bringing in American engineers to build and maintain desalination plants. Iran wanted to do the same thing, right? The Shah wanted to do the same thing, but good old jealous Britain, and good old jealous Russia, and good old jealous many powers, right, undermined America's position in Iran. It was actually a colour revolution against you by the French socialists, the British socialists, your allies. Your allies fucked you over, right? But the Islamists are dictators. Now, the Iranian protesters have set fire to the Al-Rashul Mosque in Tehran. This is one of the biggest, as you can see. It is a stone structure, yet, of course, it is predominantly wood underneath that facade. And that wooden facade, right, the wood is burning. And it actually turns out that a lot of the so-called stone is, in fact, pressed. Where you get chipboard, you get that ugly coloured chipboard. That's what it is. It's actually not even real stone. Actually burnt to a crisp and crumbled. Well, yes, this is a video that's been confirmed by Ross that it was set fire on January 9th. And sources like New York Post, etc., have confirmed that there is ongoing. However, major outlets, including the BBC, have not independently verified this. Why? Because BBC is the British brainwashing corporation. They're too busy glazing Iran, and their modernisation. However, Iran's top judge inspected the site and vowed revenge, blah, blah, blah. Of course, as I said yesterday, the Iranian army, and today, again, most of the Iranian army has not turned out. Most of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, it's believed that many have either fled the country or are dead. Okay? There is a revolution. I think we can now call this a revolution, although the casualties are minor, which is a good thing. Though, yeah, the mosque is one of the key, Al-Rashid is one of the key mosques of Syria. the Shia religion. A lot of them around the world have the same name. They're all branches of the Masjid al-Mashhud mosque. Masjid al-Mashhud is an Islamic figure of Iranian Islam. He's the chief oppressor in history. So Iranian women, of course, did in many parts of Iran start the protests. It started, as I said, there were many anti-hijab protests, but of course you can see they're not just women in these, but there are many, right? The hijab, of course, is seen throughout the Middle East as a symbol of Islam, yet it's nothing with Islam. It's a costume they used to put on slaves. The predominant slaves of the Middle East were women. White, black, or Arab, didn't matter to them. They enslaved women for over 1,000 years. In fact, slavery in Iran Iran was out of slavery before Saudi Arabia. And, of course, the British ended slavery in the Middle East when it took down the Ottoman Empire. But it didn't. Now, of course, this is a message not by the Iranian revolutionaries, not just to the Iranian government, but Islam around the world. Many, of course, feminist groups are nowhere to be found. One of the greatest symbols of the Iranian Revolution, one of the protesters made fame with a viral video of her lighting up a picture of the Ayatollah and using it to light a cigarette. Now, of course, as you can see, the situation in Iran, normally the snowfall they'd be very snow covered. The snowfall this year is very light. Iran is in drought. It's hard to actually explain that, despite the fact there is snow, that drought doesn't always mean no water. It just means a lack of water. It's like you're at a certain point below average, it's declared a drought because there isn't enough water for the region. Again, this would be fixed. It would cost billions of dollars, but instead of spending billions of dollars on fixing their water problem, they build grand mosques. They buy Chinese jet fighters, which is weird because they're supposed to be able to. They build and export Su-25s. Where's that money going? Well, the regime for years has been pocketing money and sending it to Switzerland. Good old Switzerland. When it comes to corruption, never underestimate the Swiss banking system. So there we have Iranian Revolutionary, glorious symbol of the Iranian Revolution. As you can see, the Persians are not like the Arabs. The Arabs are more like... Most of the Arabs are Semites, by the way. But there are multiple revolutions in Iran. There's the feminist revolution, which is actually most of them like this have not identified as feminists, but as free people of Iran. But there is a feminist revolution in Iran. I'm not denying that. But there's the persecution of the particularly Baha'i women, which have the Baha'i revolution. Okay, so you have the Zontarians and they're aligned with the Christians right now, and the Baha'i. As more and more groups align with each other, Iran is crumbling because it's a color revolution. It's a shift of colors, right? American Revolution was a color revolution, okay? When you had the red coats turn into blue coats, right? A lot of Americans don't know this, but around a third of your, you only fought a third of the British Army, right? And most of whom, the predominant British Army never left Canada. But when you did fight them, you lost. If it wasn't for the British aristocrats who actually were behind the American Revolution and joined in secret partnership with the founders. But of course, moving on, there is similar situation in Iran. That the old guard, right, who remember the years of the Shah, basically now putting their support behind the freedom movement of Iran. Now, the freedom movement of Iran is a loose coalition behind the prince, the heir apparent, the Shah's son, and he wants to see, some of them, to see a strong, free Iran, that women can, live their lives without the Islamic dress code, and other vestiges of imperialism, because technically that's what Islam is, a barracks religion. Okay, it's a religion created for war by warlords to justify raidings, raping, pillaging, and slavering. But where are the feminist groups? They're too busy protesting in Minnesota. So let's compare the protest size. Thousands of people across the United States, allegedly, right, with the largest being in Philadelphia with just over 1,000. I wonder how many of those are journalists. But on the national scale, again, it's not that much, right? Only more than 1,000 nationwide. So Philadelphia, the largest, and other major cities, involving hundreds in Denver, Indianapolis, Burlington, Portland, Chicago, and New York City. Sorry, the revolution is cancelled due to a lack of participation. Allegedly, digital engagement drew more than 45,000. Really? That's 50 to 75,000 people surrounded the mosque. That's just one eighth, or maybe not even that, in that frame around. That mosque was surrounded by tens of thousands. Around 50 to 75,000 is the estimate. And they were flicking cigarettes. Some were flicking cigarettes, some throwing fireworks. Yeah. They were cheering. They were cheering. Iran! 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 Most cheering is what you can only. It's drowned out by the beating of the drum near the, a 10 drum near the recording, which distorts the sound and the sound level, because you can't even hear the crackling of the fire. But yeah, so thousands, maybe online protest, 45,000 virtue signalers in an outpouring of grief. Meanwhile, in Iran, 180 cities, so arrests more than two. So more people arrested in Iran than turned out for the protests or pouring of grief for Renee. Hold on a moment. Yeah. Okay. Police officers and member of the Bashai, that's the Iranian secret security force, have been injured. They've lost their fear, man. People have lost their fear of the Iranian secret guard. You know, the one you used to be able to look up videos. So every day, the Iranian security forces would turn out by the thousands and beat up on protesters. Right? They couldn't even get 1,000 police to turn out. Most of the army won't back them up anymore. Right? They're divided. They're allegedly flight, but those flights have been debunked. But there have been talk of flights, but I think so far most of them have been debunked. I think those few who have gone to Russia are a delegation from the foreign ministry after being spurned by China. Yes, Iran asked China for help. I think this is why Trump said cut it out. I think he was talking to China, not to Iran. You know, if you continue on this path, when he gave a speech saying, if you continue on this path, I think it was begging China for troops. Funny they don't ask the North Koreans. Oh, North Korea said, no, we're Russia's friend, not your friend, which is true. But solidarity protests. There were more solidarity protests for Iran. More people turned out in North Texas for democracy than for Renee. And national estimates, number of protests, the largest being 100,000, but more people in Iran have protested against, more people in America have protested against Iran than have protested against Trump. So put that in your pipe, liberals, and smoke it. But right now, this is the protesters with the... Guess which ones? This is the protesters in Iran. Hello, IRGC. It's over, man, for the Iranians. Ayatollah. I think his delegation to Iran, from Iran, the foreign ministry delegation, has gone to negotiate with Putin an exit strategy. I don't think Putin wants him. I don't think Putin particularly likes Iran. I just think they like the fact that the Russians still occupy Azerbaijan, and they're trying to keep the Azerbaijanis on side, who actually like the Iranians. But I think right now there's great possibility that Iran will stop being a Russian ally and close their border. But I think in the same way the Shah said, look, we're in the region. We can't dislike our neighbours. And, and if you look at history, you had invasions by the Cossacks, the Mongols, all the way back to Alexander. Persia had many regional wars. And that is what weakened them over time, that led to the Saudis, who weren't called the Saudis then, invading and conquering. Yes. Now, Renee is a blip on the radar. Now, all these people claiming that she's a mother, well, she had her children two eldest children taken from her. They claim she's a good person. No, she was a foul mouth. They claim she was a Christian. Good Christians do not support abortion. So, she's a good Christian. Yeah, lesbian. Right. Yeah, good Christian. Right. Oh, good Christian. Right, yeah. So some people are above the law in America now, just because you're a mother, you're above the law. She was a wife. Yeah, some good wife. She left one husband, and the other died, but she didn't. Yeah. So don't lecture me. Baby killers lecturing me on Christianity. Wait. My response when baby killers lecture me on Christianity. And what should our response be to the liberal establishment?
Shut up!
So, I hopefully put Renee in context that she's a blip, right? She's a distraction. Right, Tim Walz needs a desperate distraction from the Minnesota disaster. He dropped out of the race not because of the fallout from the Somali corruption, but because when the corruption was exposed, there went all his campaign funds. Right, they drip fed him money. Every time they got a paycheck, they'd give him a cut. Now their paychecks are cut. He's caught with his pants down, and now, of course, he's got his daughter out there defending him. Her name's Hope. Don't you mean dope? Because she's another, entitled, aristocratic Democrat princess who thinks Daddy can do no wrong. Oh, daddy issues. Oh, fantastic. That's all we need. Another one. Another Hillary Clinton. That's all we need. So, look, Iran's taken a... This is Iran right now.
Right turn, Clyde.
And there's the IRGC. It's a house of cards now. That's the IRGC. It is coming to an end. I cannot say if this revolution topples them or the next. But this revolution looks like succeeding, where the last 3 or 4 were just warm-ups. And though I said yesterday that Democrats are trying a color revolution in America, you can see it's failing, right? More people turned out in North Texas for a protest against Iran than nationwide for Renee. Of course, the Democrats include their 45,000 online participants. Yeah. But don't forget, if you include online participants, Iran had 100. How many people just on one account, one X account? Okay, let's just see. How many people? So, Iran had 3 million participants by Democrats' measure. So, I think Renee, we can write Renee off as a blip. Okay? She ain't gonna be a feminist icon. Saint Renee. She's not gonna be the next George Floyd. Even George Floyd ain't George Floyd. Remember, God struck the mural, the lightning strike on George Floyd mural, and the exposure of BLM as nothing but buy large mansions. The guy in New York who was complaining about Trump and cutting off the funds. Turned out he was also he was paying himself millions of dollars. It's all these NGOs, man. We just want. I think more people want more arrests, more investigations. But historically, Iran, right, is a regional power who should not be underestimated. But I think this time, right, that we're seeing the shift to the right reaching the Middle East, which has, of course, Saudi Arabia shitting in their pants, right? Because don't forget, Saudi Arabia has been draining their people for how many years now over an alleged war with Iran. Now, Iran's nuclear program, of course, was a existential threat to many countries. It ain't no more. I think soon, particularly if a peace deal was signed, but right now, nothing can be done officially, right? And, of course, right now, there's still the Russian influence in Iran that's keeping the Iranian government in power. But that's once the army shifts, once the generals say, what do we want to do? Die in an American airstrike or throw our support behind the new leadership and retire with dignity? What would you choose? Unfortunately, most dictators are emotional, not logical. They care about the trappings of power, and they believe that the revolution, comrade. They think the greater good. Some slogans are greater good, but once the slogans stop working, and this is my main point here, people. Once slogans stop working, when young people, right? Once they become immune to slogans, this is the result. When the slogans no longer work. When the leaders can no longer snap their heels and say, obey, obey, obey. I mean, snap their fingers. It's happened to Queen Victoria. This happened to Charles the First. This happened to King George in the American Revolution. There's, of course, in World War II, the King George then was a more reasonable man, which is why the establishment killed him, so they could have their war, just like they did. He was warning them about the catastrophe of war, how World War One was a catastrophe. And we're seeing more and more, the establishment today be more and more pro-war, and I think, you have mostly on the left Trump derangement syndrome, and most of them are pro-war. But here they are, not one single leftist protest, for the people of Iran, for freedom. So you can no longer, say with any and don't forget as the Iranian Revolution spread, so will the death of Islam spread, because it is linked, intrinsically linked, authoritarianism and Islam. There's no separation, right? The doctrines of the Islamic Republic come from Islam. There's no authoritarianism without Islam, and there's no power over the people without Islam, right? They don't have an existential threat to the nation. They don't have the love of the Shah comes from the love of his people. Now fondly remember him for his love of the people, and realize now that all the videos, once they now were declassified and made public, that were hidden from the Iranian people, right? The interviews, etc., were never broadcast in Iran. The Iranian people had no idea. They just only heard the negative Western media. But yeah, the daring few, are now realizing that they've been deceived, and the deception came from the liberal establishment. The liberal establishment is losing its authority in America. That's why they're so desperate. So the best thing to do is keep up the pressure. Thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. You can support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy me books, buy me merch. Thank you, each and every one of you. I appreciate you all. See you in the next video, and bye for now.